Welcome to the Entertainment Ecosystem panel. And I'm really excited to be hosting this conversation with these amazingly talented digital executives from across the entertainment industry. They're all leaders in what they do. They've won tons of awards in all sorts of areas, lots of Emmys up here on this panel. And one of my favorite awards was the iPad Hall of Fame. Dan, you'll have to tell us more about that later. But as we've heard over the past day and a half, there's been a lot of talk about the role of the chief digital officer gaining prominence within the organization, particularly in industries that are undergoing great transformation. And interestingly, for us in the world of entertainment, while there's certainly sweeping change, these guys are at the epicenter of a lot of cultural shifts that are happening brought on by digital technology. And as much as audiences are changing in how they consume content, what we do know is that they still love content. And what we're seeing is that as much as there's transformation, there's also a renaissance happening within particularly the television industry. I think we're living through a time where a lot of people will say we're in a new golden age of television. There are more scripted series being created than ever before. There are more distribution outlets than ever before. We even see talent migrating from what was once only the silver screen onto television. You have actors like Kevin Spacey or Matthew McConaughey, who are Academy Award winners, Alfonso Cuarón, who's an Academy Award-winning director in film, also producing for television. So a lot of exciting things happening. I think one of the other things, too, that we'll also get into is kind of the notion of the rise of the superfan, right? We have rabid audiences that are forming around content that they really, really love, and huge opportunity there. So hopefully over the next hour or so, we'll have a lively discussion about all of these topics. So by way of introduction, I'll just kind of quickly, you can see everyone's up there. I don't know if you guys are sitting in the right order, but to my left, we've got Thomas Gawecki from Warner Brothers. We've got Dan Surratt from A&E Networks. We've got Kristen Frank from Viacom, and we've got Lisa Hashaw from NBCU overseeing Bravo and Oxygen. So to kick us off, even though all of you have tons of challenges navigating this complex digital landscape, could you just quickly, in 10 words or less, tell us what you actually love about your job?
My job touches almost every part of the company, and it's constantly changing. I love that.
Building new things every day.
I think for me, it's the people, the brands, the content, the innovation, and the experimentation.
Mine is only funny if you understand the context that my whole career was in news. So I've switched. I'm a digital immigrant to the Bravo Oxygen world. So I said, the power of a Real Housewives fan with a mobile phone. Now that's true engagement.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, so kind of just to kick it off, even though the entertainment ecosystem is changing, you know, over the past day and a half, there's been a lot of talk about the role of the chief digital officer. And it's interesting because now that TV has become inherently digital, how do you see that your role has evolved? And do you feel like you have a bigger seat at the table within your organization than you did 18 months to 2 years ago? We can kind of kick it off conversationally. Everyone, whoever wants to be first.
I think the role has definitely changed. I mean, it's gone from, all of us are veterans of this, of, overseeing websites that, were slideshows and information about shows to actually the way in which our content is now distributed and will be in the future. So from websites to apps to platforms where, for our company, we've now just launched on Apple TV, we're on Roku, we're on Xbox 360, we're on websites, we're on our own iOS and Android apps. We've taken kind of the next step in terms of distribution, and we're having that direct-to-consumer relationship while still reinforcing our relationship with our MVPD partners, but distributing that content in a new way, which has totally changed the dynamic of how we interact with our fans.
I think you look at Kristen's title, Connected Content, and that's really how the world is changing. So no longer digital things aren't sort of like the leftovers that you kind of got, it's whatever we didn't want to put on air. Now it's very much connected. One of the most successful things Bravo's ever done was this show called Top Chef, and then there was a digital extension, and you really needed to watch one to understand the other. And you really, content is connected over whatever platform it may be.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, just to build on that, if you look at, digital is changing everything about all parts of our business, and it used to be, kind of a specific incubated sort of area. Now it's really permeating, our distribution businesses. It's fundamentally affecting how we make content. It's certainly affecting all the ways in which we do marketing. And the fact that all the viewing of certainly our film and television content, and it's even more the case when you get into video games, is connected and unconnected screens means that we're also suddenly, from a digital standpoint, looking at these core platforms that are gathering tons of data about customers, and that's a really, really interesting new opportunity as well. And so I think the job's changed a lot.
Yeah, and I agree with what everyone said, and I'd add to that we're also working much more closely with our technology organization and our chief digital officer. And in fact, I was on vacation not with him, but I was on vacation and talking to him every single day of my vacation 2 weeks ago. And I think that it also, a big part of our role is to start to advocate for the kind of talent that we're bringing into the organization now as well. I think to your point in terms of data, bringing in data scientists, bringing in social scientists, bringing in, better and different thinking product developers and engineers, and really being the catalyst for that within the organization in a much larger way, bringing that as a much larger voice to the organization than there's ever been before.
Yeah, I think, Kristen, that's a really interesting area. So if you think about that, the product historically in most of your organizations was considered the content, right? It was the show, it was what was being produced, et cetera. The definition of product, I would imagine, in all of your organizations has vastly changed, and the importance of engineers, software developers, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that transformation that's going on within your organizations and how these inherently creative organizations are responding to a new culture of engineering and technologists?
Go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's a really, really interesting area, and I think it's true, and it's true in an accelerating way, and it's playing out in ways that are really hard to predict. I think if you look at even recent announcements like Oculus Rift and Facebook and things like virtual reality and augmented reality, which are a little further forward into the future, but promise a transformed way of thinking about what visual media means to consumers who may be wearing connected eyewear and experiencing content in an interactive way in the visual space in a way that wasn't possible a few years ago, all the way down to looking at the similarity in some ways between the production methods and the software platforms and the technologies used in theatrical production and video game production. While there are different levels of quality and different amounts of rendering, a lot of the same kind of principles of interactivity, a lot of the CG models are similar. Our company has a really large theatrical studio, a really large video game business, and we're constantly finding that there's a connection on the software side and certainly on the visual effects and rendering and cloud-based computing side. And when you begin to think about what this means from a creative product standpoint and all the tools and platforms that are potentially in place to give the consumer a lot more choice, a lot more involvement in the product, it's really, really appealing and interesting. And I think that there's a tremendous opportunity in the future to tap into really our best creative talent and think about ways to create all sorts of new kinds of products. And it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, I'd say that while for our company, content is still king. And we always have been in the business of having a direct relationship with the consumer, but this kind of takes it to a new level in terms of trying to really raise the product up to a more equal level with content today, because I believe that when the two are communicating, both the editorial and the product side of the business, there's a real virtuous cycle that happens, especially if you're incorporating data and insights into that, where both are made better and both rise, and ultimately you're going to satisfy fans and consumers in a much stronger way, and that's really kind of a transition that.
But has the organization welcomed that shift, or is there tension between kind of the engineering and kind of software culture with the programming and creative culture historically? Do you see?
Yeah, I don't think we see any of that tension. I think, they see us as, the next way they can communicate with those end users. And I think that's a real benefit. I think I will be the Debbie Downer and say that I think the issue for us as a company, I think, and for us as an industry, is these increased costs are pretty significant. So when you start talking about streaming directly to consumers in a unicast way versus the broadcast model, which we're used to, where we have our broadcast facility up in Sanford, Connecticut, and we send it out, and whether one person or 10 million people watch it, it's the same sunk cost. That's a much different model when you're delivering to an individual. So that's gets into the business of eating into your margins, and I think that's going to be a difficult thing for us to digest over the next couple of years.
And you really have to think. All these disparate parties have to think about the end user experience, because the bottom line, it's ease of use. So you think about HBO Go when it first came out. It was just Netflix. I mean, it's like, it's easy. You push a button, it comes to you. And as we face challenges like TV everywhere, and then the tech people have a point of view on it, and the distribution people have a point of view, and the digital or content people may have a point of view on it. I think it's really incumbent on all of us to cooperate, because the end goal is, if you want the users to get your content wherever it is, it has to have ease of use.
Great. So with all of these different platforms coming out, and how consumers are consuming content in a lot of times nonlinear ways or in kind of shorter segments, Lisa, I know you guys have done a lot of work kind of thinking about multi-platform storytelling and have had a lot of success. You won an Emmy, I think, for Top Chef.
Finally. Nominated 10 times. 10
Yeah,
times
congratulations. Exactly. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you kind of reimagined what the relationship with Top Chef could be?
Sure.
From storytelling differently?
Yeah, I mean, this was done a few years ago, and it really came out of frustration, because we were getting these leftover things, and I kept on saying, well, we need to be more significant. We need to be able to change what happens on air. And so, of course, the on-air people didn't really want to have that much to do with us. So we kind of brainstormed and came up with this wild card chef idea, and we presented to them. And so it was an uphill educational struggle. And since it's been so successful, basically now the on-air people see the value of it, and everybody has reached that point. So one of the shows that we're doing this year is a real-time show. So basically, it'll be shot during the week, and it gets on the air a few days later. And then the idea is that fans will be able to have a say in what happens. So that, all of a sudden, this fan-driven content is becoming a part of the equation. Where does that drive it? So I think it's less personally about platform, because my guess is people are lazy, and people just want to see wherever the platform is. And if they could see Last Chance Kitchen on their TV, or have the whole experience from the show to the TV on their tablet, they don't care about the platform. What they really want to do is have ease of use and have a really engaging experience. So, as we create this new thing, which is I'm not sure it's ever been done before, once again, you have to kind of look at it as like, okay, it's a new form of storytelling where fans have a say and can affect day to day, and it's really a TV show that's now a 7-day-a-week experience, and how do you build the tools and the experience to do that? Especially because it's, it can be so confusing. Like, you could look it on YouTube, you could look it on hear about it on BuzzFeed. Sending people to a lot of places. I mean, a lot of people are used to doing that, but how can you make an organic experience that, the consumer ends up being satisfied?
Right. Kristen, a question for you insofar as I know MTV, you guys had a lot of success with live events. And I think live events in particular are a place where we see less time shifting happening, incredibly high levels of social engagement. Even if you look at what happened this year with the Academy Awards and the selfie that Ellen took, and it's the most tweeted image since the Obama's hug, I think. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you think about live events differently in an age of social and kind of leveraging the fan engagement, and how you're just responding to that whole phenomenon?
Sure. It's been actually a lot of fun. In fact, we just finished the movie awards 2 weeks ago, and it was a great success. I think we had over 130 trending topics. So social is obviously a huge part of what we do, and we don't wait until the event really begins. What we do is we start months before with a social campaign, and it's leading up, to the event, it's through the event, it's post the event. And I think the key is really to get at least skin in the game and get deep engagement and almost currency for our fans in the social space I think engage them in a way that also very much respects them and doesn't doesn't say, for instance, here's a hashtag on the screen, tweet this. It really respects the fact that they already know what they're doing and want to be a part of changing the destiny of what's going on. So, for instance, with the movie awards, we had Tyler Posey, who's one of the stars of Teen Wolf, on the red carpet and within the show, and we basically allowed people to tweet during that time to have him do different things so that they could actually disrupt the show, so that they could be a part of what was actually happening in real time. And so on the red carpet we had a puppy pit where the puppies were all dressed like all the movies that were being nominated. So if they wanted him to pick up a puppy, he'd go pick up the puppy that they told him to pick up. If they wanted him to go and disrupt the All Access camera and put a Hi Mom sign up, he'd do that. And they really had a lot of control in getting him to do those things. And I think that is really one of the ways that it has fundamentally changed. The dialogue happens before the show, the dialogue happens during the show, it happens after the show, it gets more people to the show, it gets them more deeply engaged, and I think we'll do more and more of that disruptive activity where they have more and more control because they don't want to just be told what's going on, they want to have a part in the show and in the outcome and in the content creation.
Right. Well, it was interesting. On the panel yesterday, David Shing, also known as @Shingy, I suppose, from AOL, talked a lot about how audiences have audiences now. And he was talking more about, I think, consumer brands and what was happening and how did marketers tap into that. For you as entertainment brands and programming executives to a large extent, how are you tapping into audiences that have audiences to actually amass what you need and scale and...
So I'll give you an example of, since I was talking about the movie awards, we tap into fans and their fan bases as we lead up to these shows as well. So for the movie awards specifically, we used O2L, which is our Second Life, and it's a group of folks, and they started tweeting and started becoming advocates for the show, in the beginning, during, and after. We even had Rebecca Black there at the show. She has over 1 million followers. O2L has over 2 million followers. Same thing when we did the Miley Unplugged. We had someone there that had over 2 million followers. That was Tyler Oakley, who was a big advocate. And really, when they bring their fans along and they do it in a really authentic way, it ultimately drives ratings and drives incredible engagement across all platforms.
Yeah, I think we're seeing similar things. I think we've been spending a lot of time looking at the MCN marketplace and YouTube channels. OTL is a great example. We recently invested in Machinima, and one of the interesting things, the opportunities there, is to really have a closer relationship and work on a regular basis with some incredible new up and coming talent creators who themselves have created very, very interesting audiences and followings, and we're seeing that landscape shift very rapidly, and it's a very, very interesting way to both on our end to bring programming ideas and content to audiences in a very, very detailed and interesting, deep way, but also for us to begin to discover new talent and look at new kinds of content, particularly when you look at the millennial demographic and really different, changing, emerging landscape of content creation. And I think this whole dynamic of being able to express yourself online to attract followers, whether it's on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, and then to have a great broadcast platform is very powerful and is affecting our business in tremendous ways. And if you look at Twitch TV as one very pure expression of this, where you have people playing games and game casting, engagement numbers that are off the charts, and a tremendous focus and interest in expert participants in all sorts of games, creating a whole new kind of entertainment, a category that didn't really even exist a few years ago. Really, really interesting, and I think it creates big opportunities both to expose our own content and programming brands, but also, I think, very real opportunities to find and help amplify new ones.
Yeah, I would just add that, I think it's gone from the old days of marketing to, which would be the ad on the side of a bus, to marketing plus engagement, and using these platforms correctly to find that your super fans and to cull them together, get them to spread the message, engage with them, share. If they want to have a picture of their head on the with a beard from Duck Dynasty, you do that. You do those sorts of things that get the people involved in the process, and then they're retweeting it. It's a much different form of marketing than I think anything we'd seen previously.
And I think also talent realizes that, for their own success, now they realize that, to make your own brand, to be an influence, it will impact your show. I remember in the first season of one of the Real Housewives shows, none of them knew what Twitter was. It was sort of early, so it was 2008-ish, 9-ish. And so I couldn't get them to do it, because they're all like, well, what is this? So what I did is I just put in the bottom of the website, each person and how many followers they had. Because then we just played off their competitive dynamic. And pretty soon they got going, and then they started realizing it's the way they can communicate. And now, any reality talent really realizes it's part of the business. And then we even created at Bravo the sort of Bravo Hala campaign. So we have 50 Bravo crazy influencers who work and help us out. It's a basic marketing strategy you can't live without anymore.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting. As you spend more and more time with platforms like Twitter or Facebook, Tumblr, Shazam, the myriad of things that are out there, beyond just the opportunity to kind of promote and engage with fans, how are you thinking about how to benefit from a monetization strategy on some of those platforms? I know, you're creating an interesting partnership with BuzzFeed. There are a lot of things going on, and how you're thinking differently about those partnerships, not just for engagement, but also as business partners.
Well, I think when you talk about some of those parties, I don't know what you guys think, but it's a little bit of a frenemy situation. Because while you can monetize off certain products, increasingly, I think some of those social brands want to be monetizing off them as well, and perhaps using some of our IP to profit off of. So there's whole programs like Twitter Amplify, et cetera, to sort of formally monetize it, promoted tweets, things like that. So I would say that you absolutely have to work with them. And we recently did a partnership with BuzzFeed, which is more like a barter helpful thing. But I think you have to be careful about it because they want something from you too.
I think one of the things that we think is a real opportunity that's not there yet, but I think that could become one of the most powerful aspects of these platforms is the finding a way to really build frictionless or very low friction impulse merchandising and commerce into these platforms. And I think that when you look at it's a difficult thing to get someone to click on a buy link and you at the same time and actually complete a purchase, and there are all sorts of obstacles in the value chain to doing that. And it's a big part of our business, certainly on the home entertainment side of things. These platforms give you obviously access to audiences that are almost perfectly targeted for that type of thing. You often can find someone who is has a strong affinity for a franchise or a product or a title. They may even be in a conversation in which they're expressing an interest in purchasing or buying the movie ticket or buying the DVD or watching the TV show. And so there's in principle, a really fantastic opportunity to drive to that action, drive actual tune-in or the purchase. And we are continuously looking at ways to experiment, both directly with those partners, but also with some of the newer companies that are coming up and building platforms to enable this on a cross-platform basis, to see if you can build really simple, really frictionless, very easy to use, to your point, that sort of don't think about it, but make it work. And I think that if you could get that to work at scale across these platforms, they have such size and such relevance that they could be very transformative. And when it does work, if you look at, for example, the mobile free-to-play gaming space and the tremendous growth you've seen in the top games in that category, because of the massive network effect, global penetration of the Android and iOS App Store platforms, so that when something takes off, you get to this incredible exponential curve, and you can really drive a meaningful business. I think that these platforms do hold out that promise if you can make it work in a one-click, seamless enough way. We're not there yet, but I think it's a really big opportunity.
So one of the other comments that was made yesterday, I think it was on the PR panel, I think it was Scott Rubel said, we're living in a time of unlikely partnerships or unlikely bedfellows. Can you guys think about places that maybe a couple years ago you wouldn't even have considered forming a partnership with certain types of organizations or companies that now you might think of? I think it even came up today on the Arts and Education panel where Harvard and MIT are actually collaborating on a number of initiatives in the digital space, just recognizing that there's a great sweeping transformation going on across the education system. Our higher education system. So anything that comes to mind that you guys have worked on that you're partnering, forming partnerships now, working with companies that a couple years ago maybe either didn't exist or just would have never been in the consideration set?
I mean, I'll throw one out that in terms of, I think what this one reflects is the change in their business and how they've evolved. Is, Apple has always been a great partner in terms of a download to own business, but to think about using them as a platform for distributing your content, whether it be just on-demand content or live streaming, is, I think it gives everyone a certain amount of pause, because there's a question just that everyone asks, and I think is in every other Business Insider article, of are they actually going to be in the MVPD space? Are they going to create a TV? Are they going to disrupt our entire world? That's that question. The idea of syndicating content to SVOD services like Netflix and Amazon. Are they great benefits to us in terms of our helping to produce programming, or are they essentially slowly leading us to our demise by essentially offering our programming for $8? These are the people that and we all seem to be throwing ourselves into the pool with them. It's just a question of to what extent and what we think we're going to actually end up getting out of the relationship.
Right. No, and there's a lot of tricky negotiations happening across the board with those. Thomas, one of the things I think that's interesting that you were a big leader of at Warner Brothers was the whole Ultraviolet Initiative and the studios coming together actually to really figure out digital distribution. You want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I think that's a really good example of one of these cases where you have such rapid change in technology. It fundamentally affects, the quality of the consumer product, and you need, in any media industry where you have multiple players, you need standards and formats and some consensus about what the technology and product should look like in order for it to be a good consumer experience. And the problem we always have when you have a product that is not being controlled by a single company and a single product visionary is that it's difficult. It's difficult to have any multi-company consortium design anything just by design or by definition. Ultraviolet is an attempt to solve a really, really important problem in the digital ownership and in particular the cloud-based ownership of media world, and that is that a consumer does not want to have to buy, in our case, the same movie or the same television show twice, simply because they bought a new device or decided to switch retailers or decided to watch on the television versus their tablet. You want to buy something once, own it in the cloud, and be able to access it anywhere, anytime. And to enable that in a multi-retailer, multi-format, multi-DRM world, you need a standard that allows everyone to kind of operate in the same way. So Ultraviolet has been an effort over the last 3 or 4 years to put that in place and really just to deliver a very straightforward promise to the consumer that once you buy something digitally, you own it forever and you can access it anytime. It's technically challenging to do it. It requires a lot of working together and creating common specifications, but it is a really great example of not just 5 major studios, but many other content providers and dozens of technology companies, infrastructure providers, service providers, all coming together to create one big global ecosystem, which is now live in 10 countries and serving many, many millions of people, and has been very, very helpful in developing that business.
Kristen and Lisa, any interesting partnerships that have come up in your landscape?
Well, I'd have to actually echo Dan because I think that's the most current and the thing that you probably wouldn't have seen or expected, maybe 5 years ago that we would be doing. But I actually think it's very positive, these relationships. They reach audiences that we might not be able to reach. They gain affinity for shows that people are catching up and binging on 1, 2, 3 episodes, series and seasons of a show. They're much more likely to tune in to the new season and series. So I think that what I like about them is that they are getting more content in the hands of consumers, and as a result, more consumption is happening across the board that might not happen
Right.
of older series library, but also then of new series that are launching. So I think that's been a big change and also a very positive evolution for us and thinking about how we continue to gain affinity, gain fans, and how we window that in such a way that ultimately everyone benefits, mostly the consumer.
Well, speaking of the windowing question, I mean, I do think a lot of these new negotiations, to your point, help to increase fans. They help to monetize library of older content. Even if it's series that are still currently on air, people catch up over the past 5 seasons. We definitely saw that with, the Breaking Bad phenomenon that happened last year leading into the final season. But how does all of that change how you think about windowing and kind of the content deals that you're structuring? Because it kind of turns everything kind of on its head to some degree. How are you navigating that? Anybody?
I think that it's a fascinating area because there's been a lot of change over the past 3 or 4 years. It's one of these areas where technology is continuously changing the landscape. Windowing is an incredibly important part of the business. It's one of the fundamental ways, certainly in the movie and television, even video game business, that you create value and create great, I think, efficiency in the marketplace by providing our content and our product in a lot of different ways at a lot of different times to consumers at different price points and at different points in the life cycle. And figuring out how to set that all up in a way that works all around the world is complicated. And I think you've just seen lots of different experimentation and changes, and that will continue to happen as consumers develop, have more ability because of the technology they have in their hands to make more choices, as discovery becomes both more powerful but also more complicated, and I think that's a really interesting kind of aspect to all this. And also as you have more and more and more different kinds of content in the marketplace at different points in time, and I think we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years, different types of producers of content create very different strategies. If you go to the some of the newest kinds of content in the marketplace, things like made for YouTube or made for digital short programming, even in that category, you see a tremendous diversity. In some cases, content's released all at the same time. In some cases, it's actually windowed in a very traditional way across a variety of different platforms, on and off YouTube, behind and outside of paywalls and so forth. And I think we're seeing a lot of experimentation in the marketplace. One of the other, I think, observations about this is that there's the other aspect of windows is that consumers can be very confused about what windows exist and how they work. And I think that as windows have changed in various segments of the industry, as that continues to happen, we see that whenever we go out and do research, we find that many consumers are not as certain as we are when the windows start and end, exactly how they're defined. And that's one of the marketing and messaging opportunities we have, I think, is to help define that more clearly and help consumers find what they want, using that as a vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo both their points. When you look at Kristen's point about it builds an audience, it gets people engaged in shows that otherwise would never see it, is absolutely true, and they're a huge asset in terms of helping build an audience, season over season. I think one of the concerns that we kind of struggle with is Netflix is now. I guess as of their earnings report a day or two ago, they're now 35 million domestic subscribers, which would make them, even with the proposed merger of Time Warner, people in this building and people in Philadelphia, would make them still the biggest distributor of video in a major way. And I think when you look at that and you look at the economics of what you get from that relationship versus the economics you get from the Time Warners and the Comcast, you have to take a real moment to think about what the value exchange is and make sure that, to the windowing point, you're giving them content that in many ways you have gotten most of the value out of from your traditional methods of distribution, and also understand that you're also in some ways training those viewers not to watch ads. We tend to forget at times that we are in a dual revenue stream model, one that encourages subscription fees and ads. And so we don't necessarily want to get to that place where people are so used to watching content without any advertising on it.
Yeah. Thomas, you actually touched on something to build on. In addition to windowing, right? Windowing is obviously how long are we going to do our licenses and the time frames of the content being released. But you also think about the length of content in and of itself. It used to be, it was either 30-minute show, a 60-minute show, and I think what digital has done is create this whole new area of short-form video. You look at the YouTube sensation and what's been going on there. How are big media companies, which all of you sit within, thinking about the role of short-form video, where that lives, and actually, I think, Dan, to your point, how do you start to monetize that, recognizing that, it's a low CPM business, right? It's harder to monetize on the short form side. So kind of the role of the format and then how you might think about monetizing it.
We actually don't think there's a difference between short form and long form.
Same.
It is quality premium content that is just maybe a little shorter. So our CPMs are exactly the same as they are for our long form content. So we are adamant about that. We've not gotten much pushback because they understand that, again, what you're buying is that premium environment and that premium content. I think one of the reasons that you are seeing as many of these MCNs and kind of video startups is that we as an industry of, again, established media companies have not been as great as we could be in terms of getting our content to these platforms. I mean, we got out-apped by Netflix and others and YouTube and all these places where we weren't an option. Now that I think that we're all deploying these apps, we are an option. And I think given 20 minutes or an hour free in your day, if you have the option to watch short form UGC content, or you have the option to watch 16 and Pregnant, or Real Housewives, or Warner Brothers movie, I think you're going to go with that. That's my guess. And I think as you see more and more of us get to those platforms and make that content available, you will start seeing it swing the other way.
And where are you distributing the short form? Is it mostly through digital?
Yeah, primarily digital. I mean, it's through our own sites and apps, and then through partnerships like Hulu, YouTube, and other places. But YouTube is great in certain ways, but it's it's a little bit of it's just an enormous ocean that you're throwing stuff into.
Also, short form can serve a totally different purpose
Correct.
than long form. Long form is the shows. So it's the shows on another platform. Short form can serve the purpose of preview clips that are getting people to watch the shows, whatever the platform are. And also for the super fans, it's all the extra content you're dying to know that's not about in the show. So behind the scenes, what really happened at the Real Housewives of Atlanta reunion, the after show with Andy, whatever those things are, it's all the extraneous pieces which a lot of people see great value in. But it's not the same as just watching the show. I mean, watching the show is watching the show.
I think, we've had a really good experience with creating, as you say, very high production value short form content. Really sort of aiming at television or even theatrical quality, releasing it on short form platforms, but then also releasing it through all of our traditional windows. So, there's an ad-supported window, there's a home entertainment window. We sell it as EST on iTunes and video on demand through our MVPD partnerships. And in some cases, there's a television exhibition at some point around the world. And that's been a very interesting way to allow our talent to experiment with, new runtimes, new narrative formats, new structures, but also, have a good monetization model. We are taking note of some of the, if you look at the 12 to 24 or the 18 to 35, demographic, and you look at the numbers for things like Twitch TV, which is, literally game casting of gameplay, or you look at, my kids play Minecraft all the time, and then sometimes when they stop playing Minecraft, instead of going to watch, a show on Cartoon Network, they go and watch other kids playing Minecraft on YouTube, and it's sort of it's not really an entertainment category that I had in my mind as a real thing, a year or two ago, and it's, you can't say that the quality is at the same level of any of the things that we produce as companies, but it is taking a lot of time, and they're choosing sometimes to do that instead of to, watch the more professionally produced content, and so we have been spending a lot of time looking at that and trying to understand, what's the DNA of that, and where does it take you in terms of building brands and new franchises and so forth.
And I think for MTV and VH1 specifically, we've always had a very strong voice and created a lot of interstitial, content storytelling, and we have a couple of focuses with VH1 called VH1 Snack and with MTV called MTV Other, and those are all short form content plays where they're very loud and they're very fun and they're very different, and they have nothing to do with 16 and Pregnant or Faking It, new show that just launched. And we, from a monetization standpoint, we've partnered with Starcom on that, and are also producing and integrating some of their brands into that content. I think in a fun, playful way that's really relevant to fans. And I think also, we do a lot of development with, for instance, our after shows, and when we do things like that, it's much more playful, it's much more rough and raw, and we find that a lot of the talent that we bring in to do that stuff ultimately ends up feeding our development cycle, both in terms of ideas and talent in terms of people. So that's a real benefit to being in the short form space as well. But at the end of the day, I agree with these guys. I mean, good content is good content, period. It's not about whether it's long or short. It's got to be good, and it's got to resonate. And it has to be native to the platform that you're distributing it on as well, so that it's meaningful.
So, Kristen, to build on something that you just touched on, too, in terms of how you're leveraging the talent within your organization and also looking for new talent, what are the types, in the roles that you're in, where do you see the most important hires within your organization? What are the skills that you're feeling are critical? What are the hardest ones to find? How are you looking at the whole talent system right now for you?
It's increasingly difficult.
Yes.
I mean, I literally just had a conversation with essentially our head of HR today, trying to get someone under contract. And do you really need to do that? And I was like, absolutely, because the value you have in these people, that the moment they walk out the door, you've lost essentially somebody who may have built your products, and it's a totally different ballgame than all right, somebody knows how to do PHP and build a website. Someone that has a vision for creating products is incredibly valuable. And the market, that we all compete in, which is different from, our brethren in the programming group, is, they're generally, fighting between themselves and other broadcasters or
right.
programmers. We're against everybody in the world because it's now Google who wants our people, or YouTube, or or someone else, or Facebook, or whoever it may be. But it's not just Discovery's knocking on their door. It's anybody who has anything to do with digital, and that has made the prices that much higher and the competition that much greater.
Particularly tech, product, emerging media products. All these areas are ones that are in demand at startups. And if you're in your 20s and 30s and you have an opportunity to go do something that sounds really cool and potentially make even more money, or come to work, at a more established company, which is opportunity, but it's a certain path too. It's a very competitive environment for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd add, I agree with that, and I'd add that we also are trying to hire people into the organization that are kind of new roles for us. Like data scientists, social scientists, people who can help us with analyzing data and creating predictive analytics to make our editorial better. I still think that you have a lot of the success comes from your gut and hiring really, really smart and great creatives. But when you can marry that with some great information and predictive analytics, you're going to be better off. And I think that for us is a little bit of a shift, and and that's a competitive marketplace to be tapping into. Right.
Yeah, also those data analytic people and the product people being able to cross over into the creative content world is a unique capability.
Right.
So it's like that having that conversation is.
Well, and Kristen, I think you bring up an interesting topic that you look at companies like the Amazons of the world that are getting into the content space, the Netflixes of the world, who are at their core, they're data-driven companies, right? And they're using data to make decisions in ways that entertainment companies or media companies hadn't really in the past. And I think largely these were B2B companies, right? Most of the monetization came in a B2B way. I think the world is evolving with digital and putting all of you in kind of, even though you're transacting in a B2B way, you're forced to be in a B2C relationship with your consumers. So the role of data is becoming more and more important. How are you guys navigating in the data world and, applying that data? What's valuable, and are your organizations in a place that you're really starting to use it, not just to make analytical decisions, but also look at it, I think to Kristen's point, kind of creatively to make better product?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely, it's a very, very valuable tool for making better product. I think one of the biggest opportunities is to use data to create a more effective way of delivering recommendations to our customers. And I think that helping drive that discovery process in a very organic and very very helpful to the consumer way is one of the most valuable things that we can do. Discovery is one of the things that's become most difficult as things have become digital because there's a certain spatial quality to the physical world that our brains are wired to deal with. And if you remember walking around a Blockbuster video, which is not an experience most of us have these days anymore, one of the things that was great about that was that you were able to sort of perceive hundreds or even thousands of pieces of cover art in the space of 10 minutes of walking around. And there was a lot of opportunity in numerical terms to say, there's a movie I always wanted to see and I never saw. There's a movie that I did want to see and here it is. And and there's a movie that looks great. And it is difficult to replicate that experience on the iTunes homepage or the Netflix homepage. I mean, there's just not enough space. Charts don't tell the whole story. There's all sorts of quality to spatial discovery and serendipity that is hard to replicate. And I think that data-driven social discovery, data-driven recommendations, all these new technologies which allow websites and services and apps to become more intelligent about understanding what the consumer might be looking for and what they might like are really, really important. And there's a whole new level of capability and power that's kind of come into the marketplace in the last year or two. I think it's one of the biggest potential transformations in terms of helping consumers find what they want.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think when you just put us juxtaposed with an Amazon, they're a technology company, we're a content company. And so, we dedicate most of our resources to the creation of content. And if you look at how they break down their resources, a lot of it is in technology. And so we're essentially diametrically opposed, but still trying to do the same thing. And
right. But do you see shifts then in your organization, or is it still a fight to get what you need?
We are knee deep in it. I mean, we have had a number of very successful apps and download in the TV Everywhere space, and we're now trying to use all that information we're getting on a daily basis to see, which way do you go? I mean, I can tell you that my guess about our Dance Moms audience on our TV Everywhere platform on Wednesday, it is teen girls, because it is all coming from iTouches. Right? So you see that device is what's lighting up on a Wednesday afternoon. Well, look at the time of day and look at the device. Just from that I can distill something. When I start to go get more information, try to get more information about that end user, being COPA compliant, of course. You can try to find out more, and I think that's what we're really getting into.
And what we believe is, the first and third party data that we're getting gives you very valuable insights, whether behavioral, whether they're predictive, whether they're emerging, and with that, if you utilize them correctly, you will be able to create better content editorially. You'll be able to develop shows in a much better way because you're on the very early end of the adoption curve and understanding what's trending and what's bubbling out there. You're much better at marketing because you're being more relevant to people. Mm-hmm. You're not just splattering information to them that doesn't take into account who they are and what they're interested in. And I think even from a sales and integrated marketing standpoint, you're much smarter and much more directed and focused. And so it's a big part of our trajectory and kind of where we think there's real value.
Great. Well, we have some time for questions from all of you. Speaking of audience engagement, any questions? I see someone right in the back there.
Hey, how are y'all doing? I had a question about the one of the comments made about the ad load and remembering that it's a dual revenue stream, and I'm wondering what obligation each of you feel at your company to help the industry move to recognize those dual revenue requirements, push the ad load, significantly higher into your deals and transactions. So, for instance, I notice AMC forces no skip in the Comcast app. Other networks allow skip functionality to come. So I'm wondering, so first question is really globally, what obligation do you feel? And then is there a mechanism through which you all interact across the industry, whether it's through the NCTA, any tech committees and the like, to unify some of those issues so that the experience is consistent for everybody?
Well, the first part of it is I feel, we're compelled because it's what gives us a paycheck every 2 weeks. So that's our number one reason for being compelled. But honestly, I mean, I think again we are not a subscription only service business. I mean, HBO obviously is, and they're incredibly successful at it, and so they don't need to rely on that. But for businesses that have been based for many years on that dual revenue stream, you have to be cognizant of that, and you have to reinforce that across every platform you go to. On the web these days, we are running not the same ads, but the same ad load that you would see on broadcast. And we did a lot of testing on it before we went to that place to make sure that we weren't going to have enormous abandonment. And we did not see it, and that was why we went that way. And it's done incredibly well for us. We have not, as a consortium, worked with the NCTA or any other organization about ad disabling or any of that. Those areas of concern. We've just, in all of our apps and where we put our content, we've made sure that you can't skip through an ad break. You may be able to fast forward in the content, but when you get to that resting place, you're presented with the ad lib before that segment. And I think it's critical. I think consumers understand, and there's the survey every week that would you rather spend $5 or $1 and not have to watch ads and all this. And when you actually put people to that test, they'd rather watch the ads. And so, I mean, the economics of how content is subsidized by advertising is non-insignificant, and I think consumers tend to learn that when they're presented with the real purchase price otherwise.
Any other questions? I see someone in the back over. Yep.
Hey, how are you? One thing I'd love to hear more discussion around is the cord cutter demographic, in that we've kind of reached a situation where technology is in a place to allow people to consume content in a way that's easier for them, be it through Chromecast or Apple TV or Roku or what have you. And you have the benefit of getting some new content out of that through something like Netflix, but you also have content that's kind of being held hostage by incumbent distribution methods. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are around when that tipping point is going to happen, right? I think the biggest example of that is probably with Game of Thrones, HBO Go, how HBO has kind of refused to offer it as a standalone, even though there's a huge amount of vocal interest for it. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are around that.
I think maybe just turning the question around a little bit. I think that the one interesting observation that you pointed out is that there are all these different ways to consume content. And I think one of the exciting things, you can sort of separate the question of how is content packaged and bundled. And there obviously are hundreds and hundreds of different business models in the industry across dozens of cross connections and intersections of platform. And it's hard to sort of look at all that, any one sort of example individually. But if you look at this question of how technology has transformed the consumer's ability to get content, and one of the things that's been really exciting from, I think, my standpoint is that you have seen tremendous innovation all across the ecosystem, whether it's from startups, from Netflix, from HBO Go, anyone else in the TV Everywhere ecosystem, when it comes to letting you watch your content on a huge variety of devices. I mean, you can get HBO Go on a tremendous number of platforms, and it's a fantastic. I mean, I watch HBO Go on my Apple TV, and that is my go-to place for that viewing experience. That's the convenient thing for me. I think it's been this tremendous explosion of ways to watch that has given the consumer a tremendous amount of flexibility. If you look at the TV Everywhere ecosystem, which is very effectively allowing the consumer to sort of pick their device and pick their location, and have that be sort of in a separate place from their video subscription. I do think there's a tremendous amount of flexibility that's come into the marketplace. And obviously lots of other change, still out there, but I think the consumer has a fantastic experience right now when it comes to choice of how and where to watch.
Any other questions out there? I see one right here, and then another one right there. We'll get you next. Either one.
Hi. Obviously, one of the themes of the program here is about talent, and digital talent, obviously, but implicit is also posterity. So you guys had covered an issue or spoke of an issue a moment ago in regards to the challenges to find talent. How much of that lack of ability to find talent or to fill those holes actually creates a bit of a slowdown on some fairly imperative business initiatives?
I think I think that there is an incredibly competitive market. I think that data scientists, engineers, software developers. We have a larger and larger presence in Silicon Valley, which is one of the. We're trying to go to where the talent is in many cases, and we have game studios all around the world. In order to tap into different talent pools in different places, and I think it is challenging, but I think that we're not alone in being challenged by it. I mean, if you go meet with a Silicon Valley startup, or if you go meet with Google or Facebook or Apple, or if you go talk to Amazon about their strategy for expanding around the world, you sort of hear the same thing, which is that it's really difficult to find enough people to fill the positions we have. And so I think it is challenging, but we're not necessarily uniquely positioned. And I think that in some ways, entertainment companies, media companies offer, who are looking for technologists and data scientists, offer a really, really interesting, unique, and differentiated career path, because there are a lot of engineers and data scientists who are also movie and television and game fans, and I think there's the opportunity to play a pretty transformative role in how the industry develops. So definitely, it's one of the biggest challenges we have, but I think we share it with the broader community as well.
Do any of you guys want to comment as well, or no? No. All right, we got another question.
Hi, it's a great panel. I'm Jim Blue-Ice from Kismet Media Group. Michael Auerbach, my partner, is over there. Wave, Michael. Where Kismet Media Group is a content development, production, and distribution company. And we turn talent and brands and trends, social media trends, into engaging original programming. So my question to all of you, since you sit sort of at the matrix of digital entertainment and traditional linear entertainment, have any of you decided to greenlight something maybe that would be on your digital platform that would then turn into more of a national linear programming, meaning on your cable networks?
Yeah, I mean, at Bravo, Watch What Happens Live, the Andy Cohen talk show, started on digital platform. It was shot in our conference room by one of my, guy with a video camera. And it's, as you know, now a national show and doing quite well, had 3.5 million viewers the other night.
Yeah, but
So,
what I mean, have you personally identified something and brought it into the company as opposed to the programming executives deciding
That we did.
to greenlight it and then bring it to you guys? The other way, the inverse, it comes through you first.
it did come through us first.
Do any of you have any of that? Anybody else comment on that?
I think
And are you looking for that? Because we have some programming at the media group that would.
We just did the Real Housewives Awards, digital only, and it's going to be a special next year. So I'd say it happens all the time.
You're doing it.
Yeah, we're doing it.
All right, I think there was another, yes, right behind there.
Hi, Kristen. My question's actually for you. My name's Dana Berkman. I was a producer and director at True Life for 5 years. I worked for Marshall Eisen and Betsy Forehand. And I wanted to follow up on the talent question because I think it's really interesting. Now I'm a chief digital officer for a municipal government. But I wanted to ask you about growing young talent at MTV, because I know I was a producer director at 25 years old, and that was one of the most amazing experiences I thought that Viacom offered. I met my husband there. He also was very young and kind of rose up through the ranks quickly. But that really kind of surprised me. I walked in on my first day as a production assistant. The next project I was an associate producer. The next I was, segment producing and then producing. And I just really found that they gave great opportunities. It was a great place to start a career and give great opportunities for growth. So maybe if you wanted to comment a little bit about that, because with the digital change, I think even more so, you've got this young talent pool who has these skills and are now learning these skills in college especially, and maybe you could just speak to, how that has helped with your success.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm glad you had a great experience there, and congratulations on meeting your husband. It's awesome. We take talent development very, very seriously. It's a huge focus. In fact, right now, I'm working really closely with our head of HR and trying to make sure that, you know, a new space that we're creating is incredibly conducive to how young people like to work versus, you know, being, you know, set off in a cube somewhere. You know, how can we really create, you know, benching? How can we create opportunities for people to collaborate in different workspace areas, on different teams? How do you set people up so that you're having them, you know, align and work together versus working in siloed groups in a waterfall kind of experience, regardless of whether it's content development or product development? You know, really looking at the kind of perks that are out there in the marketplace, whether it's free food or whether it's, you know, what kind of machines and equipment and operating systems do you want to work on. We also have a lot of focus on mobility within the organization. And that's a really big focus. It's a big company. There are a lot of big brands, and you know, between Nickelodeon, Comedy Central, and TV Land, and MTV VH1, CMT Logo, there are a lot of opportunities to move. Even Paramount, frankly, is part of our world and our family. And you know, we're just trying to take the best talent and move them where they have opportunities to grow. And you know what I find is that we get really good talent in the building, and we're very happy about that, and we don't take it for granted, and we really try to make them move forward and give them every opportunity, listen to their ideas, because the truth is they have better ideas than I have. So I can, you know, take their ideas, try to nurture them, and try to elevate them at the same time. And I think that, you know, it's a good place to be, and that's what we're out there trying to sell too, and make sure that the people know it. So maybe you could be a spokesperson for us.
Well, thank you all very much. I think we're about out of time. So thank you to all of our panelists and for all of you and your engaging questions.